Good evening to you. Well, as the newly sworn-in 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump did not hold back today. His inaugural speech was as big, as aggressive, as swaggering, as full of optimism and pride, and frankly, hubris, as we could possibly have imagined. "I was saved by God," from the assassin's bullet, he said, "to make America great again. A golden age of America was now beginning, when it would be richer and more powerful and far more exceptional than ever before. This was Liberation Day." Trump railed against the radical and corrupt establishment of Joe Biden's America, with its horrible betrayals and an education system teaching children to hate themselves. Now, if all of this is what we might have expected from Donald Trump at his most Trumpy, the policy platform outlined was just as extraordinary. The American army will now be sent to the Mexican border as he declares a national emergency there. Millions and millions of migrants will now be deported. He will tear up entirely the Green New Deal and, in his words, drill, baby, drill for the liquid gold under American feet. And he declared a global trade war. There will be a new wing of the American government, the External Revenue Service, which will raise tariffs so that foreign countries enrich American citizens. There would be also a massive cultural shift. It will be the official policy of the American government that there are only two genders, male and female. He is taking back the Panama Canal, and he wants to send astronauts to Mars, as of course does Elon Musk. Now, in all of this, we can hear and almost feel the world changing around us. Hugely provocative and, as I say, swaggering. This may be the most important political speech of my lifetime.
My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From our sovereignty will be reclaimed, our safety will be restored, the scales of justice will be rebalanced, the vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago, in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
So what can the rest of us expect from the near future? Donald Trump is nothing if not mercurial and unpredictable. But somebody with a better chance than most of predicting his mood is Victoria Coates, one of the longest-serving staffers in his first administration. She worked in his National Security Council, specialising mostly in the Middle East, and she rose to be its deputy director. I wanted to know how much she thought Trump had changed since his first time in the White House.
I think just in terms of experience, Andrew, I mean, he's very much the same person that he's always been, quite frankly. But of course, we've been through this before. He knows what to expect. The soon-to-be First Lady again was saying it's much easier on her logistically. She knows the White House, obviously knows the staff. I think, Barron's 4 years older, so that's easier. So I would really just say experience. And the other thing then is also the people he's bringing in. 4 years ago, he didn't really know some of the folks he was bringing in, Rex Tillerson, Jim Mattis, for example. They had sterling resumes, and it seemed like a good idea, but personality-wise wound up not being a good match. So there was some turnover. I don't think you'll see that this time.
Certainly one of the big differences is the people around him, as you say. He's got both J.D. Vance as vice president, but also Elon Musk as self-proclaimed first buddy. Tell me a little bit about how you see the relationship between those three playing out.
I think it's a very strong relationship, and J.D. Vance is a very different vice president from Mike Pence. He's much younger, has a young family, obviously, has been a senator, incredible life story. Coming out of Ohio, and to my boss, Kevin Roberts' book as the head of Heritage. So I think, that's what you're getting in J.D. Vance. And then the friendship with Elon Musk I find fascinating because, this is a real partnership between the American political and high-tech sector. And, again, Elon has an incredible life story. What he's done with both SpaceX and Tesla, among other ventures, has been incredible, a huge service to the American people, as well as obviously making him the richest man in the world. But I think, he has that spirit of entrepreneurship and sort of can-do inventiveness with it. I think President Trump finds very attractive. And, that is one of the great strengths of the United States. So it's good to see that relationship developing.
One thing I think everybody would agree about Donald Trump is that he is unpredictable, that he is mercurial. You never know what he's going to say next. And you never know what the people around him are going to say next. Here in Britain, a lot of people are very upset and surprised by some of the things that Elon Musk has been saying about the British government and the grooming scandals and all the rest of it. Do you think those kind of things are said on Trump's behalf, or is Elon Musk freelancing?
No, I think Elon speaks for Elon. And, obviously there are a lot of concerns about what's going on in Great Britain with the Starmer government. It's not in political lockstep with the Trump government, obviously, and it is a very, very important relationship. So we'll see how they navigate. I know they met in New York and that it was reasonably cordial. Obviously, because it is such a significant relationship, there are things that just continue to happen regardless of who's prime minister and president, as it should be. But, obviously Elon can weigh in on whatever he wants, but there's actually a very interesting group that's here in Washington for the inauguration. We've hosted a movement, the Make Europe Great Again movement, and so I think there will be a lot of interest in meeting with them, talking to them. Obviously, Prime Minister Maloney is here as well, and that relationship is developing too. So it's sort of an interesting moment for the transatlantic relationship, particularly in terms of conservatism.
And in MEGA rather than MAGA, I would assume that Nigel Farage is part of that.
Obviously, yes, the Reform Party is part of that. We had a representative at our first gathering. I think he'll be back at our second. So I think that is clearly the new wave that we're observing in British politics. But it's very interesting to us as a conservative think tank.
Any thoughts on the growing controversy here about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the new UK ambassador to Washington? He has been a commissioner in Brussels, and he is said by some people around Trump to be too close to China. Is that the kind of decision that Keir Starmer would be well to rethink, do you think?
Well, it's obviously the prime minister's decision to make. That is a prime concern of the incoming president. I think he is very preoccupied with how he's going to manage the relationship with China, which is somewhat adrift from my perception. He is going to try to establish closer ties, but he's also talking about very significant tariffs on China that will put a lot of pressure on the Chinese economy. So I think, having a UK representative who is more staunchly in the counter-China China camp would be ideal. But again, that's the prime minister's decision to make.
Though it's one I think that the president can effectively veto if he chooses to do so. I mentioned, his famous unpredictability. He was discussing buying Greenland just a week ago, and he said some fairly fruity things about Canada and elsewhere. Do you think we just have to get used to a president who says what's on his mind day after day after day, and accept that it's going to be a bit of a wild ride?
Well, we lived through it the first time, Andrew. So I think we made it through the first 4 years. I think he's a much more known quantity now, and quite frankly, I find that unpredictability helpful. I said to him at one point after the elimination of Qasem Soleimani that he had really reset the board in the Middle East and given us a great deal of flexibility in terms of what we could do because he was unpredictable. Nobody knew. So it gives you as a policymaker, as I said, much more flexibility. So I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. And the good news is we survived it last time. So I'm quite sure we will again.
And of course, you were a Middle East expert in the White House back in the day as well. So I'd be very, very interested on your perspective as to what Donald Trump is likely to want from this very, very early, very tentative ceasefire, tiptoeing its way towards a peace deal in the Middle East. Obviously, one of the big questions is what happens to Gaza itself. What's your perspective? What do you guess is going to happen?
Well, I think we're going to have to get to a point where Hamas is significantly degraded, if not disarmed, and no longer a functioning fighting force, because the scenes we saw yesterday as those hostages mercifully came out, but Hamas was certainly not letting them go in a peaceful fashion. That shows you the militantism that burst out of Gaza on October 7th is still there. I think the president will be very concerned about that. He said that he does not want the Strip to turn back into a terrorist haven. And I think, though, that he's looking at this more strategically as a piece of a broader approach to the Middle East, because Saudi Arabia, for example, has said that they can't go any further on normalization talks with Israel until this situation is somewhat resolved. And so I think he sees the steps that have been taken in recent days as a good faith effort to get to that. And then the question for the Saudis is if they're going to let Hamas have a veto.
I'm skipping around the world here, but again, your instincts about Ukraine, because originally Donald Trump said that he could resolve the entire thing within a couple of days. It's now going to be a few months, but he does seem determined to get some kind of deal. Do you feel the Europeans who think that he's too close to Putin have a bit of a point?
Well, I think that actually, again, can play in our favor. And the fact of the matter is the only president of the last three under whom Putin didn't invade Ukraine was Donald Trump. So that's a pretty good indicator from my perspective that Putin will listen to Trump the way he wouldn't to Biden, for example. And in the case of Ukraine, I'm just back from a tour of the three Baltic nations who are kind of next in Putin's sights. If you follow from Ukraine to Belarus, then they're next around the sort of collar of Russia, and they're doing all the right things. They're about to decouple themselves from the Russian electrical grid. They're energy independent, increasingly on imports from the United States, and they're spending well over 3% of their GDP on defense. And so they have a good news story to tell. I got a lot of dissatisfaction over some of the folks we met with about what other members of NATO are doing, primarily Germany and France, and then Canada, you mentioned, who are lagging well behind even the 2%, let alone the 3% threshold for defense expenditures. And so you might find there's kind of an old Europe, new Europe kind of division going on with what you might call new Europe, partnering more closely with the United States even than Brussels.
Very, very interesting. It doesn't sound like it's a one-way kind of give Ukraine away plan anyway. Victoria Coates, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC.